Welcome my friend to my library of games, a collection I've amassed over the years. There's PC games, console games, and games that are old and those that are new. There's the obscure and the popular, so why not come in and join me as I curate these games and have a look at to see which games were good, which games were bad, which were the hidden gems, and which ones deserve to be hidden. Sit down and relax, and welcome to Alex's Gaming Library. In today's review, we're going to be looking at Euro Truck Simulator, a game in which you can simulate driving a truck around Europe. Have you ever browsed a video game shop? Well, I guess you have, but there was a time when simulation games were everywhere. Truck simulators, police simulators, flight simulators, and even airport firefighting simulators. Simulations of random jobs across a variety of disciplines, and while the genre kind of devolved into a bit of a joke genre with such titles as Goat Simulator and Granny Simulator, it has still remained a thriving and growing genre with a pretty hardcore audience. An audience who really love simulator games and take them extremely seriously. But hey, that's just passion, and passion is good. So how about this simulator game, Euro Truck Simulator, which released in 2008 and was developed by the Czech-based developer SCS Software, whose, when deciding what next to develop, they flip a coin to decide between a hunting game or a trucking simulator, with the game's Ocean Dive and Bus Simulator being the occasions where the coin landed on its side or vanished under the sofa. This is the second major trucking title developed by the company, with 18 Wheels of Steel being their first title and their latest title being the pretty popular American Truck Simulator. And before we dive in here, there is just a little disclaimer that the edition I will be reviewing is the Steam 1.3 edition, which is different to the disc version as it includes the UK as a drivable country, a few more roads in Eastern Europe, and it just runs better on DirectX, which is always a good advantage. Now, let's get in a cab and haul this review to its destination, and our first drop off is a place where we can see what's on the box, or the Steam store page for this one. The original Euro Truck Simulator, the game which has become the classic of the genre and is still relevant today. The first truck simulation game in a European setting with European long-haul trucks. There isn't really a great deal to work with here as it's a pretty short blur, but let's work with it anyway and do a spot check on the accuracy of the sail after sinking 84 hours of my mortal lifespan into this game. Is this the original Euro Truck Simulator? Yeah, it is more or less. It's version 1.3, so it's the patched version, but is it the classic of the genre? Well, Euro Truck Simulator 2, in a style similar as to how Age of Empires 2 stole the classic status from Age of Empires 1, has now pretty much taken over that place of prestige. But I do recall this game being quite popular, and it's still pretty favourably spoken of. However, when saying it's still relevant today, that's where things get a bit iffy. Now, when this game was initially released to Steam in March 2013, this had a better likelihood of being true, despite Euro Truck Simulator 2 also being out when Euro Truck Simulator 1 released on Steam. But if the Steam chart figures are anything to go by, then I'm afraid in the year of our Lord 2019, this game has faded quite far into irrelevance, and has consistently had pretty low numbers in the player base. Also, while I did say that this game was and still is positively spoken of, that is the case, but a trend among the reviews advises prospective new buyers of the game to skip this title and go straight to Euro Truck Simulator 2. But wait, there's more. Drive freight from London to Rome, to Berlin, to Madrid, to Prague, and many more cities. In realistic vehicles, faithful reproduction of driving trucks on a European road, pick up a variety of cargoes and deliver them on time. Highly realistic, meticulously detailed models based on a real trucks. Actual working instruments such as flashing indicators, temperature, and low fuel warning lights, wipers, and a full set of gauges. Pan the camera around the cabin just as if you were actually sitting at the wheel. Well, you can drive freight from London to Rome and then to Berlin and on to Madrid before finishing in Prague, and there are quite a few more cities. Are the vehicles realistic? Sort of, kind of, mostly I guess, but we'll get onto that later in the review. Faithful reproductions of driving trucks in Europe? While you can't buy licensed trucks such as Scania or Mercedes, the imitation versions in this game do look a lot like their real-world counterparts, and their detailing is pretty good for what could be achieved at the time of development. Actual working instruments as opposed to instruments that do not work, the indicators do flash, there is a temperature gauge that does nothing and doesn't affect gameplay at all, lights and wipers are there and present, and a full set of gauges, yep, just don't expect them to do anything or move at all, they're just cosmetic. Well, the speedometer and the tachometer work, but yeah. Oh, and by the way, you can pan the camera around the cabin as if you were sat at the wheel when in first person mode. Overall, this is a mostly accurate sell, even if time has taken its toll on some parts of the blurb, and none of the claims are false or even really that misleading. An ultra-picky viewpoint can find fault in some claims in the second paragraph, but really, it's a simple sell that does its piece and gets it over and done with. Right, so what do you think you'll be doing in this game? What is the bread and butter of the gameplay? Well, it's driving trucks, isn't it? And what is the most common purpose of trucks? Hauling freight over long distances, which is what you have signed up to do in this game. Upon starting a new game in career mode, you'll pick your starting country and then be taken to a truck dealer to choose your first truck, which will be a C-Class truck of one of your 4 brands: Swift, Valiant, Majestic, and Runner. And let's quickly talk about the trucks, because I really do feel that a good driving game, or a driving simulation game, or something involved driving motorised automobiles, can live or die on having a good spread of cars, vehicles, etc. that feel unique. Each brand should feel different from each other with their own strengths and weaknesses, their own little perks, their own little flaws that just makes that car feel a bit more human in a way. Euro Truck Simulator sadly does not have this. The C-Class trucks do feel quite challenging to drive as they struggle to accelerate well and hit 90 kilometers per hour, and they have pretty stiff steering, but once you've upgraded to a Class B truck, you've pretty much come as far as you need to in terms of trucks, since the speed limit is 90 kilometers per hour on the motorway, and you're not really buying the truck for its top speed, and the Class B trucks handle well, accelerate brilliantly, and just drive well, good brakes, and don't really eat all the fuel in the world. Which sadly means that they make upgrading to a Class A truck quite obsolete, sadly. And I did also own multiple Class A trucks throughout my career, and the only 3 differences I could tell you in confidence was that the interior looked different, the exterior looked different, and the fuel tank was ever so slightly bigger. But again, the trucks had no fatal flaws or exceedingly awesome traits, making pursuing a new truck beyond the Class B truck quite pointless, apart from ticking off one of the objectives set by the game. You could fathom that buying a better truck would also mean you are acquiring a more mechanically reliable truck, but you would be wrong. I treated some of my trucks well and some like dirt, and to be honest, it was no different. In real life, if you were to start your truck straight up from neutral into 7th gear all the time instead of a nice low gear, you would probably be doing horrible things to your engine, your fuel efficiency, and the gearbox itself, and your drive-off speed would be an absolute crawl rather than, normal healthy acceleration. But in Euro Truck Simulator, you can drive off like a charm in 7th gear and never leave that gear because there is no consequence. Hell, even if you bang your truck into 4th gear permanently and keep your foot slammed down on the accelerator for an extended period of time, does the engine overheat and blow out? No, there is no reward or punishment for following or disobeying good practice of maintaining a vehicle that is working flat out hauling goods all over Europe. Your tyres don't get punctures or need replacing because there just really is no maintenance mechanic beyond filling up the fuel tank every now and then and making sure your driver gets a good night's sleep. But what about damage? Well, let's talk damage quickly because there isn't really a lot to talk about, and I want to cover damaged cargo later on actually. Crashing your truck is going to damage your truck. I know, right? Who would have thought? And the more you damage your truck, the worse it will perform in a style of struggling to accelerate and maintain a high speed, and eventually just outright stalling. It's an okay damage model, but it's not the best since you're not always going to crash your truck head on. Sometimes you might sideswipe a car or catch a lamppost with your back wheel, but all the damage just feeds into the universal health bar of your truck, which will decide when your truck starts working like crap. A really cool damage system, which can be seen in other driving games, would have different components start to fail, such as gears becoming non-functional, wobbly wheels, or poor steering, before the generic coughing and spluttering of a truck that just can't accelerate. But hey, a damage system that at least has some form of punishment for sloppy driving is better than no system at all. Oh, and for the record, in regards to rolling your truck, which the game claims you can do when needing to potentially call out the emergency rescue services, I sadly could not achieve it, and I never really ran a risk of it happening, or having it almost happen. If you did manage to roll your truck when playing this game, well done, though my truck always just seemed to have a superior gravitational attachment to the planet Earth. Anyway, getting back to what happens after you purchase your truck that never breaks down unless you slam it headfirst into a brick wall, you will be offered the opportunity to undergo a tutorial which will guide you through transporting your first load from pickup to delivery before letting you off the leash to pursue your European trucking dreams. And what you see and do in the tutorial is pretty much what you'll be doing all game. It's one of the better varieties of tutorial where you learn through doing rather than observing, and the game is really simple to learn, so you won't be spending forever in tutorial land. And it's optional, so if you don't want it, then don't do it. Once you've settled into your career and your truck, you'll soon transition into a routine, in which you'll drive down to a warehouse in a city, pick your destination and your cargo to haul, hitch up the trailer to your truck, drive to your destination city with the occasional fuel and rest stop, park the trailer in the delivery yard, get paid, rinse and repeat. And I really do mean rinse and repeat, or at least repeat, since, as mentioned earlier, your truck never really gets dirty or decays or anything, nor does anything really become challenging. In fact, the gameplay of Euro Truck Simulator is not just repetitive, it's almost existential crisis triggering levels of repetitive, but we're getting too deep, so let's dissect the play of a game or of a simulation that is hauling cargo around Europe. Let's start in the towns, or the little industrial estates that exist just outside the towns. Yes, there's no urban trucking in this game, or trying to navigate little medieval streets, or embracing the free-for-all that is the roundabout at the Arc de Triomphe. It's all dual carriageways or motorways with only really one big single-lane road to provide an actual challenge. These industrial estates are still more challenging environments to drive in, though, when compared to motorways, if only for the presence of traffic lights everywhere, and hey, I don't really have any complaints about them. They're just doing their job of regulating traffic flow, and, well, actually I do have two works with them. The first is the order of traffic lights is too simplistic, and it turns junctions into free-for-alls and standoffs when you're trying to turn left at a junction. Since when your light is green, the light for the traffic going in the opposite direction is also green, so prepare to have a fun standoff against the derpy AI, which will just sit in the middle of a junction, scared to death that it has dared to cross your path. In fact, the AI of other road users is a bit dopey in general. It's not terrible, and overall the other cars are functional as they endlessly drive the roads and motorways of Europe, and you occasionally get a real megatwonk who, like you do in real life, who just pulls out right in front of you because I guess being rear-ended by a truck doing 90 really spices up the commute. but at the same time there seems to be a real feeling of inconsistency, as cars have a hard time dealing with speed limits, with them frequently breaking the speed limit, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but on urban roads and the one on the country road, cars suddenly just seem to drive way below the speed limit for no reason, which means you'll just rear-end them if you don't notice quick enough. But I digress. The other irk I had with the traffic lights was the handing out of red light penalties, especially when amber lights are way too short when going from green to red, and I spent way too much of my own time reading up on traffic lights. But just to quickly explain, if you never seen a traffic light in your life, the red light means stop. Entering the intersection at this point means you've broken the law and you will be penalised. An amber light is still passable, but ideally you should be getting ready to brake, and a green light means, well, just drive on through, buddy. Now, I'm going to use a fun little regulation from the USA. Yeah, I know, it's not Europe, but it sounds actually quite sensible, and it comes from the state of Georgia. And it recommends that the amber light is lit for 1 second per every 10 miles per hour or 16 kilometers per hour the speed limit is. Now, the speed limit in towns in Euro Truck Simulator is 50 kilometers per hour, so some quick maths gives us 3.125 seconds of amber, which isn't loads, but it's actually enough time to react at that speed, especially since the brakes on your truck seem to be super duper powerful and practically allow you to stop on a dime. Now, I then spent way too much time of my life, of which I guess has just infinite lifespan, so I could just freely fritter it away on these little experiments. I sat down and timed the amber lights on the game, and you only really get about 2 seconds of amber before the red light comes in, making traffic lights a dangerous game, and it becomes the case where if a light changes while you are passing it, even if it was green, when you drew level with it, you'll be slapped with a fine. And while this sounds like I've gotten overly petty, this brings us to our next destination in the journey of reviewing the gameplay of this game, which is the law and how it's enforced. Now, according to the manual of this game, the law is enforced on bad truckers when violations are observed by the police. So you're not going to be caught every time you break the law, but you never really know when the police are actually watching or what areas they observe, because, well, they're actually never represented graphically within the game. Meaning you drive around a land of inconsistency and wishy-washy law enforcement who basically only ticket you when they feel like it or can be bothered. There are times where if you dare go more than 1 kilometer per hour over the speed limit, you'll be slapped with a fine, and there are other times where you can happily drive flat out on the wrong side of a road and the police won't even bat an eyelid. Now, I'm not asking for an authoritarian regime where the slightest error is punished with instant execution, but the wavy-gravy inconsistency of enforcement going from total laxity to level 1984 in Euro Truck Simulator just did not work for me, and I felt like the realism was being brought down a notch. Anyway, I do feel like we are beginning to sidetrack a little bit. But hey, now you know about the law and how it's enforced in an inconsistent way. What else is inconsistent in this game? Well, nothing really. The rest of it pretty much just runs like clockwork, nicely functional apart from the poor damage model and the law enforcement. Driving a truck from town to town and delivering loads is pretty easy and free of hassle. The driving model is very simple, though I personally would recommend playing with manual gear shifting switched on to try and add a minor element of engagement and challenge to the game, just so you're not endlessly jabbing the W key, or at least just endlessly just staring at the computer screen when you work out. You can just press C for cruise control, which removes the need to accelerate at all. And for those of you who are like me and have wanted to get into manual shifting on racing games but sucked at it, so you just stuck to automatic, this is actually a really good game to help you get into good gear changing habits. The trucks handle well and have an appropriately wide-ish turning circle, but I would comment that the brakes might just be a bit too keen, and coming to a very sudden stop seems to have no consequence on your cargo. Actually, the cargo on the back of your truck is practically non-existent. It never really seems to misbehave or sway around. Heck, the only time you actually notice it is when you try and take a corner at about 90 kilometers per hour, but nothing dramatic really happens. You'll just feel a bit of steering resistance. You won't spin out or tip over, and really, yeah, just a bit of oversteer on the cab is about as serious as it ever gets. And to be honest, this lack of drama and consequence does allude to what is the largest issue issue with the gameplay, but let's keep on alluding up to it. As you drive around Europe, there will be 3 main events that will occur which require some form of action. The first is stopping for fuel in order to stop your truck from grinding to a halt. Petrol prices vary here and there, but stopping at petrol stations based at border crossings tend to cost slightly more. Not loads more, but slightly more. Though this really doesn't put much of a dent in your economy unless you're low on money from a recent police fine or a major purchase, but hey, it does kind of encourage you to try and plan your fuel stops out to cut costs, though fuel is really going to be your only main running cost throughout the game. The second event is the driver running out of fuel. Yes, that really creepy guy who sits at your cab is theoretically a living organism, and EU regulations state that you must not drive for over 9 hours per day without a rest, and the game simulates this with your driver's maximum stamina cap being 12 hours driving before needing his 40 winks. It's kind of clockwork, and if you keep track of time you should be alright for hitting the hay regularly, and places to sleep are pretty plentiful. Not getting to sleep on time will result in a police fine at the end of your journey, and the game attempting a very vague form of psychological warfare with you, in that your driver starts yawning quite loudly and will occasionally doze off for a little bit. However, the dozing off is little more than the game turning down the brightness temporarily, which isn't really an issue at all that impeded my ability to drive. I guess a more interesting way to simulate this would have been to temporarily freeze your controls during the doze off, since the driver's too busy sleeping to steer. That would cause some penalty and some collisions and possibly some death, I guess. And event number 3 that will occur during your Euro trucking adventure is the weather. And if you are wondering whether the weather will be a cool way to affect the simulation, wonder no more, because I am here to deliver the disappointing news that it doesn't. Rain will occur periodically and will often escalate into becoming a thunderstorm, but the rain pounding on the roads doesn't make them slippy or flooded. It just runs down your windscreen and creates a minor visual annoyance which is cured through your windshield wipers, though to be honest, using them is pretty much optional as you can still see pretty clearly despite the rain. These are the only 3 major events, minus picking up and dropping off your cargo, that you'll deal with on your journey, and well, 2 of them just feel a bit underdeveloped in a way. Now, petrol and refueling, that's fine. Mundane task for every motorist go, it's been done as good as you can really get it, really. But the stamina and the weather mechanics, they're just there. You can disable stamina if you want, but I wouldn't recommend doing that, as to be honest, the tedium that is driving in this game makes me grateful for the quick 2-minute break I can reward myself with when I put my driver to sleep for a bit. But the lack of serious consequence, apart from a minor financial dent and the sound of someone yawning in my ear, is not consequence enough in my opinion, and the weather system just feels like a missed opportunity to occasionally throw the game into hardcore mode, though the very rare times when it gets foggy, that's good. That's when I raised up from my slouched and half comatose position and actually started really paying attention to the game, which really is how I describe the majority of the gameplay. Slouched and half comatose. For the 52 hours my last playthrough of the career mode lasted, I was genuinely engaged for maybe about 10 to 20% of that time, and the rest I was just half-heartedly slapped on the cruise control and occasionally tapped the left and right keys to ensure my truck stayed in lane. Now, before someone does say I am some sort of overstimulated person who needs something to happen every second to prevent a case of sudden narcolepsy, just let me clarify. I really like games about long journeys. Train Simulator by Dovetail Games, for example, is a game that has pretty much captivated me and taken large chunks of my free time hostage. And in fact, the gameplay of Train Simulator is roughly on the same level as Euro Truck Simulator, and you're just doing a very similar function, but somehow that game can totally absorb me for hours on end as I blast up and down the East Coast main line from Newcastle to York to Peterborough to London. If there had been an element of emergent gameplay in Euro Truck Simulator, or something to force my attention to be focused on the game to keep me vigilant, then this game would have been miles better. Say, such as traffic incidents and accidents occurring, meaning having to slow down, or seek an alternative route because some roadworks have rocked up again. But once again, this is not the case, and this brings me onto the world map, or the continent map, or highway map of Euro Truck Sim. Let's cover this quickly. The world map of Euro Truck Simulator is pretty big. It's not all of Europe though, it's basically just Western and Central Europe, covering Portugal, Spain, France, the UK, Germany, Belgium, Amsterdam, Switzerland, Austria, the Czech Republic and Poland. All of these countries have between 1 and 3 cities you can visit to pick up jobs and deliver cargoes to, and in terms of scale, yeah, it's okay. It'll take you a good hour to get from Poland to Lisbon, which is the longest possible journey in the game, which is significantly compressed from the predicted 30-hour journey it would take in real life, in a journey spanning close to 4,000 kilometers. And the distances in the game, as represented, they're really heavily compressed, with your truck pretty much speeding at around 1 kilometer per second when you've brought your truck speed, according to the game, to 90 kilometers per hour. It's pretty good scaling overall actually, though some areas do feel a little cramped, especially the UK, which is a country where it can take 2 hours in real life to get from Newcastle to Manchester, and in this game you'll be there within just less than 10 minutes. Sadly though, as implied by my comatose gameplay style and the footage which has been shown on the screen, you'll be driving on motorways all the time though, which is gonna be the natural home of a trucker, as these are the fastest connections between major cities. But my explorer's itch was tingling a lot, and I just wished there had been more roads or more alternative routes to explore and experiment with, such as the one really good and challenging country road in France. More of that would have been great, especially for some random outlying destinations to drop goods off to for some big cash. Anyway, we have taken the long way around to our central point, so let us return to where we have started. In the city, where jobs are delivered and collected, and you'll do your career mode admin. Each town produces certain goods for hauling away, such as chemical products, food, agriculture, logging, or general goods, and you'll rock up at one of these places and browse the menu of goods and destinations. For 9 times out of 10, the quickest way to do this is browse by city, and you'll quickly find the most lucrative job. Every city is very accessible from every other city, but you'll still need to plan your route a bit, though as mentioned earlier in the motorway-centric design of the world map, it pretty much just means getting onto that one motorway that'll just blast you to your destination as quick as possible, unless you desperately need to find a petrol station first, when you may need to make some alternative arrangements. Hitching up to your trailer is a quick and simple task of reversing the rear of your truck to sit under the front end of your trailer, hitting the button prompt, and you're ready to go. After your adventures on the motorway of Europe, you'll be faced with the challenge of accurately reversing your trailer into a tight red box so your goods can be properly dropped off and processed. Reversing your trailer accurately is a bit of an acquired skill, and it did take me quite a few attempts to get the hang of it, but it never really got frustrating, and eventually I got to a point where I was just reversing it in nicely first time every time. Well, I say that, but the game actually doesn't really seem to care about how well you pack your delivery, and will often just accept the delivery if the box is vaguely, partially in the box, though at other times it will be super strict and anal about how much trailer is actually in the box. The wishy-washy enforcement system strikes again! Once you've dropped off your trailer, all of the deductions for damage and police fines are calculated after you drop the cargo off and receive your income. Cargo damage is calculated off the percentage health left of a trailer after you've smashed it into a few trees, cars, etc. So a half damaged trailer will knock off 50% of your income, so be extra careful when delivering a high income delivery, as that little scrape earlier could have resulted in big costs. This is also where you can receive a game over as well, but that only really occurs if you've hit negative money, which is really hard to do unless you've basically smashed into every car you encountered, ran every red light to rack up enough fines. There is an additional penalty as well, which you can incur, a time penalty. And to cut to the chase, this sits alongside law enforcement as the most inconsistent and poorly implemented mechanic of the game. The reason for this is, firstly, there are deadlines for deliveries, which is what I would actually expect in a game about logistics and transportation. It should be your biggest priority alongside delivering the cargo safe and sound. However, when taking on a job, you are not told what the deadline is, which can give you a false assumption that you have loads of time to make the delivery. However, after one rest stop too many, you'll be warned that if the cargo is not delivered by the end of the day, you'll be fined. Fortunately, this only seems to happen if you sleep excessively, and and I only really had it happen to me once. But some transparency from the beginning would have been much appreciated, as knowing the deadline should be one of the biggest factors to consider when planning your route alongside fuel and sleep stops. The inconsistency factor in this, however, is due to the fact that in Euro Truck Simulator, time isn't constant. And that means that the passage of time fluctuates all over the shop, passing slowly at times and passing quickly at other times. The main factors driving the speed of the passage of time are your location and speed. Time speeds up as your truck accelerates, and the clock runs slower when you're at a stop or in a city. Now, if you did know your deadline or you were rushing to hit your deadline, having a clock that is just accelerating or decelerating on the fly is just no. It's just not something that should be there. It's a daft mechanic, end of. But once you cash up and cash out, it's time to go and get your next job and continue the endless cycle. Well, before you do that, you can buy some upgrades from the garage, such as upgrades to the acceleration and the handling of your truck, but they actually make no difference whatsoever. The only upgrade I would recommend is the fuel consumption upgrade, as that one does actually dramatically improve your fuel efficiency and reduces the amount of fuel stops you'll be making. You can also check the progress of your career, though you can do so at any time by checking your notebook in the pause menu and see how close you are to obtaining the rank of Master. You don't have to pursue these career stars, however, and to be honest, there isn't too much point, as you won't unlock anything from achieving these stars, and the difficulty doesn't ramp up as you become a more seasoned trucker, which is disappointing. The stars themselves are also pretty easy to obtain, as it's just mostly hitting earning thresholds, purchasing access to new countries, and delivering undamaged cargo. The stars only really become mildly challenging when you hit the final 2 career levels, but the lack of difficulty ramp up meant that they are still pretty easy if time consuming to accomplish. You can also unlock feats for doing certain things, but more on those later. At the end of all of this, it sounds like I have a huge downer on the gameplay of Euro Truck Simulator, and to be honest, in hindsight, I do think the gameplay just isn't that great. It's okay overall, but a lot of irks do exist, and a fair few of them just rubbed me the wrong way across my playthrough of the game. But hey, if it's functional overall, and as we wrap up this section and arrive at our destination of scoring the gameplay, I am at least happy to report that from a technical standpoint, the game runs very well on modern systems, with loading times being very short, and once you load in, that's it. The map isn't broken up into loading areas or anything like that, though there is the occasional minor freeze, but those don't usually last for more than 2 seconds and won't cause you to skid off the road or into a wall. And hey, there were no bugs or glitches that I discovered, so that's always welcome news. Right, we've had a very long journey, but we're close to the end now. By the way, have you looked out the window at any point to take in the scenery or listen to the sound of a road? Well, if you haven't, let us do so now. Graphically, Euro Truck Simulator is okay. A common trend among a lot of simulator games from the era in which this game came out is that the gameplay was the main draw, while the graphics not so much. The trucks themselves are nicely modelled and are capable of being painted many colours, from a nice orange to a horrible shade of green, and the previously proudly trumpeted highly detailed cabins that will make you feel like you are actually there are once again done very nicely, and I do like how the cabins become finer and more luxurious as you buy better classes of truck. Scenery wise, yep, the game is okay. Not breathtaking or revolutionary, but okay. There has been a definite element of effort put into the scenery, with each country having slightly different looks and feels to them, from the arid roads of Spain to the overgrown black forests of Germany and the Italian coastal roads. The majority of what you'll pass by is farmland and forest, with the occasional little landmark like a bridge, a lighthouse, a wind farm, or a lake. And yes, the water does look terrible. It almost looks like it is a missing texture or something. But I have used all my petty dwelling time on the last section, so we're just going to move right on to the UI. The road markings are authentic enough, and road signs are easy to read, and I like the extra touch of city names being written in their native language rather than the English translation. That's a good immersion point. Kinda wish that some of the signs you passed had like extra stuff like distance markers, though, but the extreme world distance compression and wonky time passage might have made it a bit inaccurate or a bit of a challenge to put in. The UI of the game is really good, very neat, very modern, and conveys all the information you need. It takes up only a small amount of space on the screen, and the text is nice and readable. Damage meters for cargo and the truck progress to fill up with red as your cargo becomes more damaged, and the red on the cargo damage meter will probably rise alongside your temper as you screw up. All of the other menus are displayed in a nice and legible fashion too, but there is one small issue with the UI, and this time it is genuinely minor, and it's just the road map. Now the map itself is pretty much a-okay. It shows the roads, your location, and the points of interest. I just kind of wish that when you summon it onto your screen to view while you drive, it was just done in a better way than it just awkwardly existing on the right hand side of your screen. Like, at least give that poor little map a window to feel cozy in or a background to rest on. Driving instruments such as your speedometer, tachometer, and fuelometer are displayed in one of two ways. When in cab view, it's on the actual dials in a truck, which is brilliant and super immersive, or if you're in third person mode, it sits on the bottom right hand corner of your screen alongside some pretty important icons. Once again, it looks alright and does its job just fine, but I personally prefer first person mode in this one, but that's my personal preference. So far, the outlook on the graphics looks good, and there is actually just one major issue, which I'm not going to spend too long on because it's actually a fixable issue, but I kind of wish this hadn't been an issue in the first place, and the issue is the lighting. At some point in this review, you will have seen some nighttime trucking, and well, the nights are just way too bright. It's like we're playing as an owl with this level of night vision, and the headlights are practically redundant apart from needing to put them on to prevent the police from handing you another fine if they happen to notice you. If you do want a darker night, however, you can always lower the brightness in your settings. At the lowest setting, you get a pretty realistic nighttime driving experience where you will need your lights on full beam and need to pay full attention to the road. However, as a consequence, menus become too dark to read, and driving at day is now like driving with extreme cataracts. It's best to find a happy medium, though the days won't look quite as good on anything lower than a default brightness setting, unfortunately. And just as a side note, the headlights on a truck are a mite too powerful, like really powerful, and it's kind of distracting. Anyway, that is the graphics discussed, and let's just quickly take a quick pit stop and listen to the sounds of Euro Truck Simulator, or tune into the radio and see if there's something better to listen to than my voice. There genuinely isn't a lot to say here. The sounds are overall below average from an immersion standpoint. The motorways are just really quiet, but I do like how the sound plays in stereo mode, which is a nice immersion point for trying to work out if a car's coming up on your left or right. But there's a critical lack of environmental sounds. There's nothing really apart from an occasional car passing by, which just makes the world feel lifeless. Sounds made by the truck are alright, the engine sounds healthy, and you have a nice horn to honk at other road users who pull out in front of you. The in-game music is alright, but you won't really have anything to listen to outside the menus, but a handy radio feature lets you listen to your own songs, provided you put them into OGG format. The radio function is okay, it's not the most sophisticated radio in the world, but hey, you could just download and convert some of the radio stations from GTA and boom, you've got a pretend radio. Though I will personally recommend Flash FM from GTA Vice City, and I also recommend just letting it play in the background on YouTube, because for some reason the game is a bit more prone to random freezing when the radio is switched on, and the radio will also cut out the first few and the last few seconds of each track for no discernible reason. Yeah, I really don't think anyone's playing Euro Truck Simulator for the plot. Let's just quickly tackle this from a world building point of view. The geography of Europe is portrayed accurately. The countries at the time of game release were all members of the EU or not, in the case of Switzerland, making the flags shown on border crossings nice and accurate. The world isn't very alive though. There's no living economy or marketplace. There is an implied one in that as you take goods to one city, the demand for that good in that city will drop and become less profitable for you to do repeat hauls too, but that never really seemed to be the case, and to be honest there was enough variety of goods to haul for this never to become a problem. I guess the main plot is the story of how your trucker becomes really good at their job, and the progression stars do ramp up in a logical way of becoming bigger and more grandiose, but they don't really become more difficult to accomplish as you move up the ranks. But I genuinely can't really think of anything too meaningful to say here. This is not really a game where a story would fit in very well, so at least one wasn't painfully crowbarred in. So feel free to make up your own story for this game as you pursue your Euro trucking dream. Okay, we're on the home stretch now, our final destination is on the horizon, but before we finish, do you want to ride this journey again? Did it live up to be a journey that stood the test of time? Well, I hate to break it to you, but unfortunately this game hasn't really stood the test of time, but it's for a good reason, and the main reason is its sequel, Euro Truck Simulator 2, whose player base is just over 100 times larger than that of Euro Truck Simulator 1. So yes, this game does sit in a category where it set the stage, but it got overshadowed by its sequel, which went on to gain huge appeal, a bit like, once again, how Age of Empires 2 did it to Age of Empires 1. In my opinion, as well, just looking at the Steam store page for Euro Truck Simulator 2 makes me want to spend more money on time on that game rather than play Euro Truck Simulator 1 again. But I sound like I'm being a bit harsh and putting an okay game down too hard. Is there anything really salvageable in terms of replay value? Well, to be honest, I don't really think I'll be getting the itch to replay this game again. It might be because I've effectively played it to death and completed the career stars, but at the same time, there are other games such as Train Simulator which are a much larger time commitment to play again, but I can quite easily develop the itch to replay that game. There are also no other ways to really play the game. No challenge mode or free roam. You can turn some elements on and off such as stamina and manual shifting, but to be honest you're best off just having those on by default on your first playthrough. The only thing I could go back to the game for is the feat system, which is a set of achievements outside of the career stars to collect for doing various things such as driving clean for so great a distance, spending so much on fuel and visiting towns multiple times. I would go back for this if I knew what the feats are, as you don't really know what they are until you earn them, so there's no clues for them, and sadly you're only really notified of them after sleeping, plus there's also no reward to gain them, and to be honest the ones I have, they're not very challenging to gain, they're just all very grindy. So yeah, I don't think there is much replay value in Euro Truck Simulator beyond one playthrough of a career. Changing your starting country doesn't really change anything, the trucks are all too similar, no extra game modes like a challenge mode, and overall the game was quite boring and unstimulating for the majority of my playtime, with some of the missed opportunities such as the weather or a better stamina system. Instead, it's time to go with the crowd and move on to its sequel of Euro Truck Simulator 2, which stands out as quite a must-have title among other members of the online trucking simulator community. And that brings us to the end of our review. God, that was a long journey. I honestly, when I started writing this, I honestly thought this would be like a 10-minute review at most, and well, it somehow turned into a 45-minute review. But hey, hopefully you enjoyed what was said there, or you found it interesting, intriguing, controversial, whatever you feel. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and I am very grateful to you. And yeah, 48, not the best score. If anything, in one way I'd kind of say anything below 50 is quite bad, but not really this time around. Euro Truck Simulator isn't a bad game by any means. I think I've had games with higher scores where I've had more hatred or annoyance or gripe, but here it just kind of didn't make the mark in a way. So it's still a good game in a way. But at the same time, yeah, it has been outplayed by its sequel, and there's just other games out there that are better. But at the end of the day, it isn't a bad game, it isn't a harmful game, it's pretty harmless, and to be honest, you know, you could still probably get a few hours and a bit of mileage out of it. And if you do want to pick it up, it doesn't cost a lot, and you know, it's fair if you don't have the money to buy Euro Truck Simulator 2 and all its DLCs, or if you don't have a great machine, and you don't really need high system requirements for Euro Truck Simulator, so you know, go and knock yourself out on it. But yeah, thank you once more for watching this review. Next review is going to be the Yellow Turban DLC for Total War 3 Kingdoms, and the next big full game review, I'm not saying which one it is. I'm going to start making these secret now, and I don't know, do cryptic clues or something. I don't really have a big enough subscriber base to be teasing people with, so it may seem a bit cocky of me, but I just want to keep it cryptic. Unless you're friends with me on Steam, and then you'll realise I'm suddenly playing a certain game a lot, probably, and you'll give it away. The wonders of Steam. Maybe I should just put my profile to invisible for a bit. Still, thank you again for watching. I'll see you on the next review, and have a lovely day, evening, night, morning, whatever time of day you are currently encountering.